Hey y'all, it's me again. I'm gonna continue reading from my book, The 1910s. Okay, let's go! America enters the fray. The fight for Belleau Wood. I think that's how you say it. John Toland. The United States entered World War I relatively late, but her forces fought in many battles. One of the first occurred in June 1918 at Belleau Wood, where the U.S. Marines performed superbly. The author of many books on military history and one of the most famous historians, John Toland, published an account of the fighting in Europe, titled No Man's Land. The book includes the action at Belleau Wood. The vaunted principle of unity of command was tottering and would probably fall unless the Marine line held. The hinge was a pretty wooded area some 5 miles northwest of Chateau Thierry. I think that's how you say it. It was known as Belleau Wood. Germans infested most of it and were driving south to take the rest so they could reach the village of Lucy Lee Boucage. I think that's how you say it. From there, they would only be 45 air miles from the Eiffel Tower. It was not a large wood. The trees were about 6 inches thick and so densely planted that one could scarcely see 20 feet ahead, except where an axe or shot had cut a swath. Unlike American forests, it had been constantly under care of a forester who cleared out the underbrush and those trees ready for timbering. Despite the lack of undergrowth, there was ample shelter in the high rocky ground, which was scarred with gullies and crags. It was an irregular area, not much more than a square mile from the air reminded some of a seahorse, some of a twisted kidney. It had once been the hunting preserve for the ancient Chateau of Belleau, which was a half mile north of the wood and was connected to Lucy Lee Bocage by a farm road. At the northeast corner of the wood was another small village, Borisches. This was held by the Germans and had to be retaken before the Allies could clear the wood. Water. Eager Yanks. By June 5th, the U.S. 2nd Division was stretched out below Belleau Wood, eager to show the world that Americans could fight as well as talk. It was a hybrid division with 1,063 officers and 25,602 men in 2 brigades, 1 Army and 1 Marine. The Leatherbacks were commanded by a regular Army officer, Brigadier General James Harbord, former Chief of Staff to Pershing, who had told him that he was getting the best troops in France and if he failed, he knew whom to blame. The French cheered these outlandish, boisterous young men from overseas who stuck their legs out from the trucks and acted as if they were going to a party. The sight of their cheery, cocky faces gave new spirit to the people. The Yanks were friendly coming, and now there was hope that the Boucher German would be stopped. Striking was the contrast in appearance between the Americans and the French regiments, whose men in torn uniforms, hungry and hollow-eyed, were scarcely able to hold themselves erect, recalled Jean Pierre Fieu. New life had come to bring a fresh, surging vigor to the body of French blood almost to death. Thus it came to pass that in those crucial days when the enemy stood for a second time in the Marine, thinking as disheartened, then contrary to all expectation, an ineffable confidence filled the hearts of all Frenchmen. An enterprising correspondent was on the way to the scene of the action. Floyd Gibbons of the Chicago Tribune had motored down from Paris that morning with Lieutenant Oscar Hartzell, formerly of the New York Times, and Holzer seeing the Americans in their first major engagement. Gibbons reached 5th Marine Headquarters at 4 p.m. June 6th and told his commander, Colonel Wendell C. Neville, that he wanted to get out to the front line. I wonder if he's related to Neville Longbottom. No, just kidding. I know Neville Longbottom is a fake character. Just trying to make a joke. Go wherever you like, said Neville. Go as far as you like, but I want to tell you, it's damn hot up there. It took Gibbons and Hartzell almost an hour to reach Lucy D. Bouquet. Shells were falling, farmhouses were in flames, the ground under the trees were covered with tiny bits of paper. Gibbons examined several and saw that they were letters from American mothers and wives, which the weary Marines had removed from their packs and destroyed so the enemy could make no use of them. He came upon a pit containing 2 machine guns and their crews. Out front was a field sloping gently 200 yards to another cluster of trees. Part of it apparently was held by the enemy. At 4:55, a young platoon commander arrived with the order to advance. What are you doing here? He asked Gibbons, looking at the green brassard and red C on Gibbons' left arm. Looking for the big story. If I were you, I'd be about 40 miles south of this place, said the officer. But if you want to see the fun, stick around. We're going forward in 5 minutes. The Marines waited, strict for action. No extra clothes or blankets, and only 20 pounds in their packs. Colonel Albertus Catlin, commander of the 6th Marine Regiment, came up to find his men cool and in good spirits. Give 'em hell, boys, he told several of them. At exactly 5 o'clock, everyone leaped up simultaneously and started forward. There was a snickering rattle of machine gun fire. German artillery increased the fury of its attack. The 3rd Battalion of Major Benjamin S. Berry faced a large open field of wheat, still green but about 2 feet tall. It was swept by machine gun bullets. The wheat bowed and weaved in the metal storm. The advancing lines wavered until someone shouted, "Come on, you son of a bitches! Do you want to live forever?" It was the legendary gunnery Sergeant Dan Daly, recipient of the Medal of Honor, whose voice had been striking Terran recruits for the past 25 years. The line moved forward about 100 yards from the wood. The enemy fire was so brutal that the men had to fling themselves down. Many died trying to crawl back. A few got safely into the woods. The rest hugged the ground and waited for dark. Floyd Gibbons and Hartzell were just behind Major Berry when he turned and shouted, "Get down, everybody!" They fell on their faces. Withering volleys of lead scissored the top of the wheat. It was not coming from the woods, but from the left. Up ahead came a shot. Gibbons lifted his head cautiously and saw the major trying to struggle to his feet. He was grasping his left wrist in pain. "My hand's gone!" he exclaimed. "Get down! Flying out, Major!" shouted Gibbons. "We gotta get out of here," said Barry. "They'll start shelling this open field in a few minutes." Gibbons looked around cautiously. "You're about 20 yards from the trees," he called Barry and said he was coming to help. The correspondent crawled forward, keeping as slight as possible. Suddenly it felt as if a light edge of a cigarette touched his upper left arm. It felt clean through. It felt like a minor burn. There was no pain. A bullet had gone clean through his bicep muscle without even leaving a hole in his sleeve. Then something nicked the top of his left shoulder. Again, the burning sensation. But he was surprised to find he could still move his arm. It wasn't anywhere near as painful as a dentist drill. He continued moving, occasionally shouting words of encouragement. As he swung his chin to the right to keep close to the ground, he moved his helmet over. Then came a crash like a bottle dropped in a bathtub. Sergeant M.K. McHenry was so close he saw Gibbons get hit in the face. To Gibbons, it seemed as if a barrel of whitewash had tipped over and everything in the world turned white. He didn't know where he had been hit, but surely not the head. If so, everything was supposed to turn black. He began talking He began taking mental notes. Am I dead? It wasn't a joke. He wanted to know. He tried to move the fingers of his left hand. They moved, now the left foot. Now the left foot moved. He knew he was alive. He brought his hand to his nose, something soft and wet. He found his hand covered with blood. There was a pain in the entire left side of his face, so he closed his right eye. Dark! He tried to open his left eye. Still dark! Something must have struck him in the eye and closed it. He didn't guess that a bullet had gone through his eye and crashed through his forehead. He could not reach the major now, but moments later he saw Barry rise and in a hail of lead rush forward and out of his vision. Merwin Silverthorne, a rather small, energetic, and bright sergeant, was just to the left of his platoon commander, an army lieutenant named Coppinger. They had set off an approved trench warfare formation, holding rifles at high point, moving at a slow, steady cadence. They started down a ravine and near the bottom were raked by machine gun fire. They hid behind a pile of wood. After 5 minutes, Coppinger shouted, "Follow me!" and ran, bent over up the other side of the ravine. At the top, he looked back and said in wonder, "Where the hell is my platoon?" They had started with 52, now there were 6. "I'm going back," he told Silverthorne, who thought, "Here's where you and I part company, because we just got across that place. That's the last thing I'm going to do." Go back. Silverthorne figured that in the military no one ever got into trouble for advancing toward the enemy, so he kept going until he found the remnants of another platoon, led by Sergeant Gay. They finally reached the wheat field, and there Silverthorne saw one of the most magnificent sights of his life. Major Sibley's battalion marching across the field of slow cannons under traffic fire. As Gay's platoon started up toward the field, he was hit in the back. Silverthorne bound the wound, told her it wasn't too bad. "You stay here and I'll come back after dark to get you." He took charge of the few men left, and they all went forward in rushes. The din was deafening. As Silverthorne hit the ground on the second rush, he saw he struck a rock. He looked down. There was no rock. It felt as if someone had swung a baseball bat across the kneecap. Yet there was no pain. He told the only man left, an automatic rifleman, to move on into the woods where they probably needed him. "I'm going to stay right where I am until it's dark and can get out under cover." He thought of his father, who had been shot in the lung at Gettysburg, yet lived to be 96. A beautiful sight. On the right, Major Burton Sibley's battalion was having bad luck, and Colonel Catlin watched with admiration as the battalion pivoted on his right, with the left sweeping the open field in 4 ways, as steadily as though on parade. It was one of the most beautiful sights I have ever witnessed. There was no yell or rush, but a deliberate march with lines at right dress. Catlin's hands were clenched, all his muscles taut as he watched the Marines march in the face of machine gun sweeps. Men fell, but fortunately Sibley's men had slightly better cover than Barry's, and the rest plodded on stolidly, listening for orders. Closer and closer they came to the wood. It must have been a terrifying sight to those holding it. Catlin had no field telephone. He hurried to the little right so he could see what was going on ahead. Through his glasses, he watched Sibley's men plunge into the wood. Captain Tribot Laspierre, our French liaison officer, begged Catlin to get to a safer place, but the colonel ignored the bullets whipping around him until one hit him in the chest. It felt exactly as though someone had struck me heavily with a sledge. It swung me clear around and toppled me over on the ground. When he tried to get up, he realized his right side was paralyzed. Captain Tribot Laspierre rushed to Catlin's side and dragged the big man to a shelter trench. No simple matter since he was so small. The bullet had gone through Catlin's lung, but he felt little pain and never lost consciousness. The bleeding was eternal and there was little to be done for him as he lay in the trench waiting for first aid treatment. In the meantime, Major Thomas Holcomb of the 2nd Battalion and Instructor Sergeant Don Paradise of the 80th Company to take private slide across the wheat field. They were to locate the 80th Company Commander, Captain Koffenberg, as well as Major Sibley, the adjoining battalion commander, and get their map locations and any other information. Paradise, followed by Sykes, safely crossed the deadly field and soon found Sibley. "For God's sake," said Sibley, "tell Major Holcomb not to take Captain Koffenberg and the 80th Company away from him. We've lost at least half our battalion." "Come on, Sykes, let's get back," said Paradise. But the other man was horrified. "You aren't going the same way we came." "It was the shortest route," said Paradise, and headed back alone. Sometimes the shell smoke was so thick he couldn't see where he was going, and wounded men kept calling for help, but a runner couldn't stop to be a medic. He finally found Holcomb on the side of a hill and lay down beside his hole to give him the message. He then asked permission to go back to help the wounded, but Holcomb said he'd have to carry more messages, so he crawled into a nearby home until need. He could see word traces, and figuring that the Germans could see him, crawled over to a hedge where other runners were digging in. A moment later, a shell exploded directly in his evacuated hole. Sergeant Silverstone was still lying in the wheat field. It felt as though machine gun bullets were passing only an inch or two over him. Every so often, a speck of dirt flicked up nearby. He gets a sniper was zeroing in on him. Then shells began falling. He decided to get up and run, whether he had one leg or not. It was about 200 yards to the woods. He dashed across plowed ground into tall grass hip high. Here he found a friend named Pilcher, who was weeping and moaning. He had been hit in the stomach. Silverstone repeated what he told Gabe. "I'll come back after dark and get you." Then he crept through the grass, which hid him until he could lunge safely into Bellevue Wood. Here it was quiet, peaceful, deserted. It was eerie. For the first time, he was frightened. He was alone, yet he knew that the Germans were near. He limped along and was lucky enough to find a dressing station where he was tagged to go to a hospital. But he located a stretcher and convinced someone to go back to the wheat field with him. On the way, he looked for Sergeant Gabe but couldn't find him, so he started for Pilcher. He looked for the wheat field in the dark, at last finding it by instinct. He saw someone could calling Pilcher's name. "Of all the screwy situations," he told himself, "here you get out of this thing once and you're right back where you started from." He felt his way until he stumbled upon Pilcher. He was motionless. "Pilcher, we're here," he said, shaking his hand. "We've got a stretcher. We're going to take care of you now." But he was dead. Silverstone was a religious man, and finding the stiff body of Pilcher intensified Christianity. It convinced me that the Lord had something for me to do. Gibbons was still waiting in the field for a minute. Lieutenant Hartzell, hiding nearby, called, "I don't think they could see us now. Let's start to crawl back." Gibbons had no idea where he was and crept toward us. They met halfway. "Hold your head up a little," said Hartzell. "I want to see where it hit you." Gibbons lifted his head painfully, opened his right eye, and looked directly to Hartzell's face. I saw a look of horror in it as he looked into mine. 20 minutes later, they reached the edge of the woods in safety. In the meantime, Lieutenant Clifton Cates of Holcomb's 2nd Battalion was leading his platoon across the wheat field toward Birches. Men were falling on both sides. A machine gun bullet knocked off Cates' helmet. He dropped, stunned. A few minutes later, Cates came to. He tried to don his helmet, but it wouldn't go on at first because of a dent the size of a fist. The machine gun bullets were hitting around and it looked like hail. My first thought was to run to the rear. I hate to admit it, but that was it. Glimpsing 4 Marines in a ravine, he staggered toward them and fell at their feet. One took off the dented helmet and poured wine from his canteen over the lumpy canteen's head. "God damn it," said the Lieutenant. Don't pour that wine over my head. Give me a drink of it. This revived him. He then grabbed a French rifle and led the quartet into Bourtress. Between the Devil and the Deep Sea. Several miles to the west, Major Wise's battalion was in reserve. About midnight, running from General Harbor, brought an order to go into the line to the left of Berry. This was the damnedest order I ever got in my life, or anyone else ever got. Wise wrote, and went on the common assumption that all the objectives of the 1st and 3rd Battalion had been secured. I was between the Devil and the Deep Sea. If I didn't move, I knew I'd catch up. If I did move, I knew I was going right down into Germany. They set out at 2 a.m. June 7th. It was black as pitch. Impossible to see even 1 foot ahead. As Wise led the battalion in single file along a road which led to sloping grain fields like a bottleneck opening into a bottle. Wise had a hunch and stopped the column. It was too deadly quiet. He led several squads forward about 200 yards until sharp rifle fire burst out on the left. Wise recognized the sharp bark of Springfield rifles and shouted out to hold fire. From the dark, someone shouted, "Look out! The Germans are on your right, and the boys derail you." Wise went back, shouted to his men, "About to face the rear! On the double!" Like everyone else, Lieutenant Lemuel Shepard was confused. He had been taught never to obey such an order without saying, "By whose command?" This word went back up the line and with answer was, "By orders of Major Wise." We're in the wrong spot. Those in the rear decided that if a major said it was time to run it was time to move fast. We picked up our feet. He called Lieutenant E.D. Cook and galloped back in the direction from which we had been going. Those behind could not go as fast. They would take a few steps, then halt before taking a few more. This continued till the first light of day as they were emerging from woods into an open field at the point where the road made a sharp curve. Till Wise gave orders to take cover on both sides of the road and dig in. The 55th Company, Captain Blanchfield was in the lead, and Lieutenant Lemuel C. Shepard, Jr. led his platoon to the left, distributing them along the edge of the woods facing the clearing. All at once, firing broke out. In the light of dawn, Shepard could see Germans moving in the clump of woods up ahead and on the right. What Major Wise had unwillingly done was led his battalion into an open field at the left of Belleau Wood, and this was heavily defended by the enemy. A fierce firefight erupted. Mortar shells began falling on all sides, landing with dull thuds, and then exploding with a tremendous concussion which was truly frightening. A breathless runner told Shepard that Captain Blanchfield had been seriously wounded and ordered him to command the company. As Shepard headed along the edge of the wood, his orderly went down. While trying to help him, suddenly struck Shepard in his left eye. It felt like the kick of a mule. He crumpled and he did not realize in the excitement of the moment that he had been hit. As I lay there, unable to move, I glanced down and what should I see on the ground beside me but the bullet which had struck me. Blood was oozing from his breeches. Close beside him, with his head on Shepard's leg, was his little dog, Kiki, who had tagged along behind him all night. He was so quiet, Shepard thought he was dead. "Damn it, they shot little Kiki too," said, and pushed her to one side, but Kiki jumped up and placed his head again on Shepard's leg, apparently sensing something had happened to his master. There that day, newspapers throughout the United States headlined the attack. "Our Marines attack a game mile at Belleau, a soon drive at night. Foe losing heavily," announced the New York Times. And in Chicago, the Daily Tribune, Marines went hot battle sweep enemy from heights near Theory. Unless America had something to cheer about, and the Marines were lauded incessantly. Everywhere one went in the cars, on the streets, in hotels, or skyscrapers. So one topic was the Marines who were fighting with such glorious success and fans. So commented the New York Times. Reports received at their recruiting headquarters in New York indicated that applications had increased more than 100% To read these pages, one would have thought it was the most important battle of the war. The wounding of Floyd Gibbons has much to do with the spate of publicity. Before the attack, he had sent to his Central Paris the skeleton dispatch intending to fill in the details afterward. When it was rumored that he had been killed, the Paris censor, a friend said, "This is the last thing I could ever do for poor old Floyd," and released the dispatch. Later, Gibbons' detailed story added more luster only to himself but to the Marines. Not only to himself but to the Marines. All this was to the detriment of doughboys who were fighting in the same division as well as those in the 3rd Division holding the Marine River line west of Chateau Thierry. Everything accomplished near that city was now soon to be done by the Marines. Small as the action was at Belleau Wood, it put a new spirit in the French and deeply impressed the German soldiers who had faced the Americans. The dash and raw courage of the Leathernecks struck horror in those defending the wood, and word was passed to beware the wild Americans. To the officers, the reckless display at Belleau was even more ominous. They saw the charge over the wheat fields multiplied many times. There were already almost 700,000 Americans in France, and more than a million others were on the way. And those are not worn and dispirited, but strong, young, and brazenly confident. Please rate, comment, and subscribe down below. And if you're on YouTube, please ring that bell notification so they can know when I upload again. And if you're on TikTok, please like and follow my videos. And on YouTube, let's get to 50 subscribers. And on TikTok, let's get to 40. Once we do that, I'm going to do something special for you guys, okay? And please pay for something either my eBay or my car. It would really help me out a lot, okay? Bye. Have a fun Friday, okay? Bye.